African country to introduce legislation criminalizing same sex relationships. Now, the country's military led government has enacted a new penal code that imposes prison sentences of between 5 and 10 years for same sex relations and related activities. Now, the move follows similar legal challenges in several countries across the region, reigniting the debate over human rights, national sovereignty, cultural values, and the role of international law in Africa. Well, to help us unpack the legal and political and regional implications of this development, we're now joined by Nigerian lawyer and former vice president of the African Bar Association, Dr Samson Osagie. Thank you so much indeed for joining us, and welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. It's nice you having me on your program.
So, how do you respond to Niger's new penal code, which criminalizes same sex relationships and imposes prison terms of up to 10 years?
Yes, I think the Niger legal system uh, is responding to what is more or less a clarion call to criminalize natural relationships among people of same sex. And it's a response to the growing tendency of the West to continue to impose their beliefs and understanding of human rights on the African continent and other developing countries. You are aware that many African countries are taking steps to criminalize same-sex marriage and curtail the rights of LGBTQ advocates. Although there are still some African countries like Angola, Mozambique, Cape Verde that have decriminalized this. But I think it's important we must respond as Africans to the fact that our culture and tradition over time do not recognize unnatural relationships. And I think Niger, being the latest in the series of countries in Africa, is following that trend to criminalize same-sex marriage.
So, I mean, it is interesting, and you've just said the word now. The legislation uses terms such as immodest and unnatural acts. And I guess from a legal standpoint, how clear and enforceable are those definitions? I mean, they could create room, I'm guessing, for abuse or selective prosecution because unnatural and immodest can mean anything.
Well, I think the legislations must have parameters for determining what amounts to immodest relationship or natural relationships or immoral relationships. You know, the laws are made to regulate human conduct, and you are aware that laws are made in order to guarantee respect for each other's rights, and no right is actually absolute. Where one man's right starts is where the other person's right begins. And if there are no laws, there are bound to be lawlessness and there are bound to be chaos in the society. So laws are made to regulate human conduct in order not to create room for abuse of individual rights in the society. So in order for us to have a saner society where conducts are meant to assist the society to live a respectable life, it is important that authorities imposes law. And I think that is the whole essence of Thomas Hobbes's social contract for state to regulate the rights and impose obligations on both individual and government. So I believe that the legislation, the penal code, which criminalizes same-sex marriage, like many other laws, must find a way to define these steps in order to bring them within enforceable parameters for the society to be a saner climate for everybody to live in.
As you said earlier, this seems to be a coming together of the region, actually, calling for these kinds of legislation. What do you think is driving this trend? You might have partly answered this, but I wonder, is it cultural and religious values, domestic politics that's at play here? Or is this something about nationalism and fighting Western governments and institutions' influence?
Well, for me, I do not think it's about really fighting Western government It is about reinstating what we Africans believe are consistent with our own way of life, because culture is a way of life. And if we begin to tolerate every influence that tend to undermine what we have held on to over the years, as our cultural beliefs and traditions, which undermines the cultural fiber and the moral fabric of the society, then we are bound to completely be swept away by foreign influence. We are not unaware what colonialism has done to us as African continent, and we cannot continue to tolerate everything that comes from the West as if we are completely dumping ground. African nations are sovereign nations in their own rights, and they have a right to protect, their tradition. They have a right to protect their culture. They have a right to protect what they believe in. After all, Africans cannot impose on Western countries or European countries what they believe in. I mean, so for me, it is not about fighting against the West. It is about reinstating and redefining the parameters within which we believe our people should operate.
All right. So maybe another way to ask this, it may be extreme, but it does speak to what you're saying now. Where does culture become problematic? Because I'm thinking of female genital mutilation. Some will say that's our culture. You cannot tell us that this is against our rights to be able to practice this thing. And yet we know and we see why we should be doing away with some of these cultural practices. Is that not the same principle in law?
I understand what you're talking about. Several several laws, several cases in law in our legal system across Africa have also proven to do away with cultures that are repugnant to natural justice, equity, and good conscience. And if there are practices which debases the human person or which debases the moral fiber of the society, as to be able to make it reasonable, even in times of this nature, the people themselves will understand and move by legislation to adjust it. Even in traditional African society, people sit down to review their practices and either amend them or jettison them altogether. So our culture is not totally repugnant to natural justice, equity, and good conscience. There are aspects, so many aspects of our culture that has preserved, that has made African countries what they are, that has made their culture rich and solid. But there are areas that we need to amend. Talking about female genital mutilation, yes, there has been growing concern and growing advocacy, which tend to get the buy-in of most African governments and legislators about having to mutilate the female genital organ. And it seems to make sense. It seems to make sense not to tamper with the female genital organ at birth, as is a way of carrying out an unnatural practice. So if we amend such cultures, it doesn't mean that we must accept every other thing. You agree with me that same-sex marriages and all the like are most unnatural, and it shouldn't be what we condone in our society as Africans, because it can be a way to further expose our moral fiber, to other unnatural, unhealthy, unreasonable, and of course, very depraving practices in African countries. So there are differences, there are limits to which we can uh, get the buy-in, can accept some of these things, influences from the West.
Okay, what's where we're going to leave it. Dr. Osagie, thank you so much indeed for joining us. Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
That's Dr. Samson Osagie, who's a Nigerian lawyer and former vice president of the African Bar Association, speaking about, another country. This time it's Niger. introducing legislations criminalizing same-sex relationships. And there are those that are defending it, and many that are saying it's out of order. Where do you sit?
They imagined a future